All right, how's everybody doing? This is the Comic Samurai. I want to welcome you to my next video. And tonight we're going to be doing another Let's Rank challenge. This is where we look at a run on a series and assign every cover a letter grade from A to F and then pick our favorite and award it that special S tier ranking. Tonight we're going to be looking at Jim Lee's epic run on the X-Men from 1991. Let's go ahead and jump right in. First up we got this issue number 1. Now this one had 5 different covers, including a gallery cover that had a collection of the previous 4. Now, I'm going to show each of the 4 individual covers, and they were separated in such a way that they stood on their own as amazing covers. Now this comic, as far as I know, still holds the record as the highest selling comic book of all time. Sold over 8 million copies. And when I think of this comic book, I think of 2 others. I think of Spider-Man number 1 by Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld's X-Force number 1. They also sold a ton of comic books. Now this is the last one of that first issue, and it's, like I said, the gallery edition that had collected all the other 4 covers into one image. And I'll put up a banner of that whole image, but I would be doing this whole line a disservice if I didn't award an A to this very first issue. I mean, how can you go? The people have spoken, right? 8 million copies can't be wrong. Next up we got this issue number 2, and it's only fitting that Jim Lee chose, along with Chris Claremont, to have the big villain be Magneto. A mutant so powerful that he can go against all the other X-Men on his own. I do love this image, but the colors on it, I wish that they wouldn't have done all these figures in such a dull gray. They're such dynamic images and characters that you wanted the bright colors, the vibrancy of it. And I don't like to see Xavier bound there around his neck and Magneto standing gloating over them. Dr. Doom demands that kind of respect, but Magneto just hasn't got there in my book. And the white hair on him, it just kind of makes him look like an old guy. I've always thought that, like beating up an old man. In any event, it's still a beautiful comic, but it does drop down to the B tier. Next up we got issue number 3, and Jim Lee wanted to do a free-for-all. I love this cover. All those different X-Men battling each other. You got some of the old school with Beast and Iceman against the newer members like Psylocke and Colossus. It's hard for me not to say Psylocke. When I was a kid, that's how I pronounced it in my mind, and people have called me out that that is not her name, so I'm very well aware that it's Psylocke. Anyway, there's Gambit back there, Archangel, all of your big hitters are captured on this image, but the one demerit that I have is that they used a white background. For some reason, it didn't really work on this image for me. Usually, I'm a sucker for that. But this one's still a beautiful image, but it got the bar has been set so high with that number 1 that one just deserves a B. Next up, we got issue number 4 here. Now, this one was a great cover. I love the images of Jubilee, Gambit, and Wolverine on the cover. It also had the hand of Omega Red. Now, I think that was kind of an interesting choice by Jim Lee. Usually when you introduce a new villain, you want to put him front and center. And I think he would have learned from Venom having so many appearances until he made a great cover appearance that he'd have done that. But he chose to just hint at Omega Red on this one. It's a beautiful image. It's one of my favorites, and this one gets an A. All right, now 1991 was the burgeoning time for Marvel Comics. They were king of the roost. Unbeknownst to them, Image Comics would be formed soon. But now, Jim Lee was at his height with this issue number 5. It's a beautiful cover, and it does feature the grand appearance of Omega Red. He's fighting Wolverine there, and that's how you measure a good villain. You put him up against Wolverine. No other X-Men can hold his own like that bruiser. The one demerit on this cover I've always noticed is that in his glove there, it's like he's been injured and his skin has been torn away. But instead of having any blood there or flesh color, they made it all metal, like it's sheathing or casing. And I do realize that it would have to have some housing in there, but they should have had some blood there. I wanted to see that Wolverine was paying a price for going up against Omega Red. He was that powerful that Wolverine could be hurt. In any event, it does drop this one down to a B level, but it is a beauty. Next up, we got issue number 6. Now, this one, I think, is one of the most unrated of Jim Lee's first run here. I love the image of Psylocke and Sabretooth holding Wolverine, a fallen hero there. I love that. And you've got Maverick's mask there. There's a lot of symbols on this one. I love how Jim Lee did interesting backgrounds, too. It's never just a boring thing to look at. The more time you can spend on these covers, the more interesting things that you'll find. And this is no exception. It's a beauty, and Jim Lee gets a well-deserved A on that one. Next up, we got issue number 7. And again, they wanted to show the dichotomy and the relationship between Omega Red and Wolverine. But this was like the 3rd issue out of 4 where Omega Red made a cover appearance, and I just wish he would have mixed it up a little more. I usually like a good halvesy cover where you can cover up half the image and you get one image, and then you can cover up the other half and you get a totally different cover, and that is fun. And just for that reason, I think I will keep this one in the A tier, but I wish they wouldn't have just used a bland red and pink coloring there. I wish they would have went full out and just had Wolverine's bluish black hair there, contrasted with Omega Red. It would have been interesting, but this one is an A, but we'll call it an A-. Next up, we got number 8, and I gotta say that this is one that just fell really flat for me. I don't know why. I like that character of Bishop. I would have liked to seen him introduced into this version of the X-Men, but for some reason, a Gambit falling there and Rogue, it just didn't work. The gray, boring background, I mean, it is a dynamic image of Bishop there, standing tall, but look at how his gun that he's holding just blends into the trade dress there. The colors on this one ruin it for me, and I hate to do it, but this one's getting a D. Alright, they can't all be 8 million copies sold issues, right? Next up, we got issue number 9, and if you weren't there in the 90s, I don't know that I can describe what the feeling was like to be a comic book collector at that time. To see this comic book hit the stands was every dream and fantasy fulfilled for a young comic book collector. Wolverine, Ghost Rider, on the cover of the new X-Men series done by Jim Lee. It blew my mind when this hit the stands. I don't have much to say about it, except that this is what an action shot, a heads-up battle in comic books was to me. It's the epitome of great comic books at the time in the 90s. Oh, this was so much fun. I loved everything about this comic book, from the layout, the characters, the design. Oh, Jim Lee nailed it on this one. Easiest A I've given all day. I don't know if that makes me a poet, but next up we got issue number 10, and I did like this one. A lot of people said that they felt Jim Lee started mailing it in at this point, but I like this one, a long shot. He was one of my favorite X-Men, and he did have a different story. He's kind of an alien, not so much of a mutant. But he's going up against Mojo here, and they did use a repeating image in the background, which is a bit of a cheat, and it seems a bit lazy on Jim Lee's part, but who am I to say? It works. It is an interesting background there, and it does look like black and white film images on a reel there, so it is interesting in that respect, because Mojo's always trying to make TV and film that are interesting for his viewers. This one works for me, and I'm giving it a B. We'll call it a B+ on that one. All right, this is the last one that Jim Lee did in his normal X-Men run, issue number 11. It's a great image, but I think it's overrated. This one has been touted as one of the greats of Jim Lee's run, and I just thought it seemed like a high school picture of these kids standing around or something. I mean, it does kind of sum up the 90s and that cheese, but it just looks posed. A lot of times there are posing covers where the heroes are standing tall or whatever, but it doesn't feel like it. This one, I just felt like it was like somebody had a Polaroid camera and said, okay, say cheese. You got Wolverine standing there holding his claws out, like showing off, and it just doesn't fit the personalities of all of these characters here. I do like the Beast hanging upside down, Psylocke in the back. It just seemed like they crammed him in there in the background. He just was real stylistic with it, with those sweeping lines. And that's a Jim Lee trope that he likes to use. I didn't like this little banner going across there. I'm sorry, but I can only give this one a C. I know that's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. It's not one of my favorites. I thought it was overrated. I am going to show this X-Men Annual 1 here that Jim Lee did. Now this one, I think, is the opposite of that last one. I think this one doesn't get nearly enough attention. It is one of the most exciting, colorful, bombastic covers that Jim Lee did. I love all of the X-Men, the figures, the heroes that I like to see there. They left Jubilee out, they left Omega Red out, and that's good. I don't really like the look of Magneto or Professor X that much, to be honest with you, either. This just captures those great characters whose personalities you wanted to see. And I gotta sing this comic's praises a little bit. I think it's a hidden gem. Inside, Jim Lee did a lot of the layouts and then had multiple artists and inkers work on it. And there's a section where Mark Teixeira, finish Jim Lee's layouts, and those two should team up more. It is so exciting and just beautiful when those two teamed up together. I'm giving this one an A, and I'm going to let it participate in the contest to pick our S tier winner. But now that we do have all of those ranked, let's go ahead and take a look at the ones in the A tier and pick our favorite. Let's take a look at the ones we've got. Oh, that beautiful annual Ghost Rider, Omega Red, Psylocke and Sabretooth, Gambit, Jubilee, and number one. All right. If I had to pick a favorite of these beauties, it's got to be between this Ghost Rider one and this beautiful one with these three characters right there on the cover. Oh, which one of these would you guys choose? Pause the video right now and let me know what you would choose as your S tier ranking. But I got to say, I got to go with this X-Men number 9. That beautiful cover done by Jim Lee of Wolverine and Ghost Rider. You really just can't capture the energy that was around comic books at that time. There wasn't a bigger name, there weren't bigger characters, and when these two were in a heads-up battle right there on the cover, look at the background, those red action lines, even this thumbnail, the blurb there, you get to see Ghost Rider's flames, Wolverine's claws. You couldn't ask for more. This is almost the perfect comic book cover, and I am happy and confident to give it my S tier ranking. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. That was a lot of fun. It's hard to go wrong with the world's best-selling comic book, Jim Lee, Chris Claremont. They were bound to create some icons. Well, let me know where you disagreed. What other titles, characters, artists, writers, runs you want me to review. Thanks again and have a great night.